All right, thank you all again for joining us today. This is April the 10th at 3:05 p.m., the International Association of Woodcarvers. Today we have with us on our meeting a special guest, or actually two special guests coming to us from Tennessee. We're going to have with us Anneofalltrades and Joshnava. They're both coming from Nashville, and again, they're going to be talking to us about spoon carving. We'll have them on in just a few minutes. I want to tell you a little bit about the lineup that we have coming up in the coming weeks. Next week, we're going to celebrate our 1-year anniversary. So we've actually been doing these meetings for a year, officially on April the 17th. Next week, we're going to have Alec Lacoste that's going to come on. He's been on with us before. He's going to do another cottonwood bark demonstration. We're also going to do a couple of giveaways. One of them is going to be this Helvey knife. We're actually going to do a live auction for that. And then I think we're going to do maybe a giveaway from Chipping Away. We'll confirm that and make sure that we get that information out for that meeting next week. Again, that's 1-year anniversary. This is our 50th meeting. We were talking about that before the meeting today. We want to thank you all again for the support, for joining us every week, for being on and being active participants. Hopefully these meetings have been beneficial and you've been able to gain some valuable knowledge from these meetings. And again, thank you all for going out on the Buy Me a Coffee page and contributing there. That allows us to pay for this Zoom membership so that we can have these meetings every week and allow enough people to come in and participate in the meetings. Make sure that if you want to go back and rewatch some of the meetings, that you go out on YouTube, like and subscribe on there. We're also on Instagram and Facebook, so you can check us out on all those places. After Alec Lacoste, we're going to have Bruce and Kenny on April the 24th. He's going to be doing a caricature carving demonstration. Jeff May, we actually met with him this week again. He's coming on May 1st, and he's a chainsaw carver. It's the first chainsaw carver that we've had on. He's going to be coming on May 1st, and he's going to be doing a little demonstration and talking to us about his chainsaw carving. Charles Banks is a flat plane carver. He's coming on May 8th. He'll be demonstrating his flat plane carving. And on May the 15th, we have Tom Matus coming on. He's a duck decoy carver, and he's going to be doing a demonstration on duck decoy carving. So make sure you stay tuned for those upcoming meetings. Again, we meet every week at 3 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. It seems to be the best time for everybody to be able to get on and participate. We have people from all over the world joining us. So we'll continue to meet at 3 p.m. Eastern Standard Time and allow those people to come on with us. Again, today we have Anneofalltrades and Joshnava that's on with us. They participate in a school of all trades, or actually, I guess they're partners in that school. They're going to be talking to us a little bit about that, talking to us about spoon carving, actually doing a live demonstration. I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Ann and Josh and let them take over the meeting. They're open for questions, so make sure that if you have questions, you ask those questions as we go, or you can throw them down in the chat. I think they're going to be watching the chat also, and they'll be happy to answer your questions as they go. So Josh and Ann, I'll go ahead and turn it over to you all. I appreciate you all joining us today, and we look forward to the information that you're getting ready to share with us.
Unmute.
You're muted.
Unmute myself. All right, there we go. So sorry.
Hello.
We're so used to being the ones unmuted that we're like, wait, how do we unmute ourselves?
Yes,
there we
how
go.
do
Okay.
Yeah, I'm Ann, and this is Josh. We met actually because of spoon carving 7 years ago. Josh was doing a project called 365 Spoons. Why don't you tell him about that?
Yeah, so I had done woodworking before, and I was learning a lot about the learning process and wanted something to challenge myself. And so how do I become a better woodworker, especially being a father, having to work full time? At the time I was doing that project, we were also about to have our second child. So, that's a question that I think every adult has. How do you continue to grow in the skills, especially in the midst of a busy life? And so I decided, hey, with just 2 tools, a straight knife and a hook knife, and some scrap wood that I could get from my shop, I could realistically carve a spoon every day for a year. That doesn't seem too hard. That was a mistake, but I did it. And while I would post them on Instagram for like the social accountability to say, hey, I did this today. And people would follow along. One of those people was Anne. We started talking in the comments. And then as I got to know a little bit more about her life, I was like, oh my gosh, you need to talk to my wife. So they both spent time in China. They have all kinds of things in common. And then they became real life pen pals.
Yeah. And then we became real life friends. And then 6 short years later, we moved to Nashville. My husband, Adam, and I have a farm here and Josh and Deb were here. And so when I moved here, wanted to build a craft school that would teach disappearing life skills. So all kinds of things from traditional woodworking to like general furniture building and design to blacksmithing to tractor repair to canning and preserving farm harvest and all the kinds of things that are lost skills, or at least disappearing skills that people my age tend to not know how to do. Josh and I started talking about my goal for doing that, and then we started talking about our goals for long-term investment in not just our local community but our worldwide community as well. And we decided, hey, we should do this together. So Josh and I started working together in February of last year, and we've been working on building not just the physical school but also the online school as well. And as part of 2020 being what it was, we ended up having to pause the actual physical building process and kind of rethink the way that we were going to do things. And so we started just teaching classes on Zoom online. And we, Josh and I both know how to do all kinds of stuff, build furniture, farm, cook, photography, start small businesses, all these other things. And we're like, okay, what's something that we could help people who are stuck at home learn how to do that would actually help them enrich their lives? And we decided spoon carving, sharpening is part of spoon carving. And then we started doing these little small business seminars basically online. And that's what we've been doing this year. But and did either one of us, after Josh was done with his 365 spoons project, I think that he was pretty much done with spoon carving for a little while, but we've brought it back. Neither one of us had any aspirations of becoming professional spoon carvers or carving nearly as many hundreds of spoons as we have this year. But we are really thankful for the opportunity to share a useful skill that not just that doesn't just help you to rethink the way that you carve or the way that you woodwork, because we are going to talk even today about design and how to think three-dimensionally, how to turn a two-dimensional object into a three-dimensional object. We learn how to use our body in uncomfortable ways and all these other kinds of things that are like not necessarily the most easy to learn virtually online, but we hope to help people not only learn those skills, but also learn how to self-evaluate and give themselves feedback and actually gain skills. Because both Josh and I, we both have some learning disabilities that made school really hard. So learning woodworking helped us both to overcome a lot of that stuff or to look at that stuff differently. And we're really passionate about sharing the things that we learned along the way, because it's so hard for us to learn new things. I think that it's given us both a really unique perspective about how to teach those things too. So without further ado, let's talk about some spoon carving.
Yeah, so what's nice about being with other wood carvers is we don't have to go over a lot of the basic things. However, I think there is quite a bit of value in constantly revisiting the fundamentals of what it is that you do. One of the marks of an expert, I'm sure you all have heard, like this 10,000 hour rule. And though that's been kind of debunked or at least nuanced at this point, one major thing that actually differentiated the people in that study was not the fact that they did 10,000 hours of practice, which, there's that old saying, practice makes perfect, but only perfect practice makes perfect. In reality, practice makes permanent. So even if you're practicing something badly, or wrong, that's going to be the way that you are going to be doing things. If you need any proof, just go out onto the roads and wonder why people don't improve in their driving, even though they're doing it every single day. Part of that is, in order to get better, we actually have to, our goal is to make things automatic. So we don't have to think. We have what we call like the feel of what it feels like, what is right and what is wrong. All of you know the feeling of going against the grain. That's you don't even have a thought about, that you might be going against the grain. You just know to change directions. And that is because of the long observation that we've done up until this point that has changed details and observation. What was conscious, it's made it unconscious and turned it into what we might call intuition. In order to improve, though, in order to continue to strive towards mastery, and what these experts do is they're constantly engaging in a practice that takes what has become automatic and looking at it again through a different lens so that it can become conscious again, allowing them to feed back improvement into their process. And so I'm constantly thinking about, even simple things like, how does a knife cut? That seems like maybe a dumb question, but as I continue to press towards understanding and grow in skill, often it's like those simple questions that when we try to provide an answer for them, we realize the shallowness of our actual understanding. And by finding those little gaps, that's how we improve. And so the basics or the fundamentals, these basic observations, people who have invested a lot of time into a particular skill can actually find a deep reservoir of knowledge in those basic concepts. And so what we're going to do today is, I know a lot of you out there are wood carvers of a particular kind. And so what we'd just like to show you today is the kind of pulling back to simplicity. As we become experts, we also know the difference between the different sweeps of different gouges, and you find a favorite one, and learning how that gouge collection may grow and grow and grow and grow. But as we continue to improve in our skills, improvement is often doing less, not acquiring more, but figuring out what is just enough. A favorite author of mine and the host of Mythbusters, Adam Savage, he says one of the major hallmarks between an amateur and a master is an understanding of tolerances. How much is enough and how much is too much and how much is not enough? That we learn through just constant exposure and experience. And so we're going to show how we're only going to use, I think, 3 tools today. We're going to use a hatchet and our hook knife and our straight knife. And we're going to carve some spoons. And we're going to talk a little bit about the whole process along the way. Some of it will be things you're very familiar with. Maybe we can drop 1 or 2 little pearls of insight that can give you some light bulb moments along the way. So we have some cherry that we split up. I'm going to axe that out using our hatchet. So I'm going to switch cameras, and Anne's going to switch seats with me.
Yes, sir.
Again, along the way, if you do have questions, throw them in the chat. Anne's going to watch the chat while I'm working. I'll watch the chat while she's working, and then Blake and everybody else, they'll jump in with a question if we miss one, and we'll be happy to answer those along the way as well. Okay?
Awesome.
All right. Let me...
Don't trip over my myriad of sharpening supplies down here.
One of the problems with working with somebody that's 5'2" is figuring out the camera angles. So...
Do you want me to help?
No, I think we're... yeah, that's good. That's good right there. Okay, so we have some cherry. This is... when I first started carving and I was doing this project, again, I thought I could just take the wood scraps that I have in the wood shop, because I worked in a shared wood shop for an organization that I was working with. And we had, little pieces of walnut, cherry all over the place, but that was dry, seasoned wood. And while I was learning how to carve, I would be watching these people on YouTube or finding experts, and they were just I thought they were just stronger than me, because they were just pulling off huge shavings with every stroke, and I'm making cherry glitter, that's about that size. And one thing that I didn't know when I first started was the major difference between seasoned wood, or wood that's had most of its moisture evaporated out, and fresh cut wood that still has the moisture content of when it's close to the tree. And that made all the difference for me. And because of that, I never really got to work spoons like they talk about in the Swedish tradition. A lot of our spoon carving comes from, the information that we learned from that was advanced by Otto Solomon in what's called the Sloyd school system of Sweden, where Otto Solomon took basically this practice that farmers would do with their children around the campfire at the end of the day, where after a long day on the farm, they would sit around the fire while dinner was being made and carve useful items that they needed for the farm. So spoons, ladles, garden forks, hay rakes, all kinds of things. And that was where also like the dad would explain things to their children and teach them. And so Otto Solomon looked at this practice and saw not only the cultural implications, but also the value in education, because it was while they were learning, while they were being talked to, they were also having context. And the context, like actually doing the thing that you're practicing, is one of the major, it's like gasoline on the fire. Particularly if you can find something where you have to learn the thing in context and where you are also interested. And so one of the other things that Otto Solomon talked about in this original Sloyd system was like, let's take this practice that farmers do, and let's also bury it in something that kids are also inherently interested in. And so they would make all kinds of useful items, toys, all kinds of stuff like that, just using a straight knife and a hook knife. And through that, kids would gradually grow in their abilities. And they would also learn things like the value of quality and the value of craftsmanship and what perseverance can do when you're working on something. And that, Otto Solomon said, whether they ever pick up a knife again or whether they ever dovetail a box in the rest of their life, they would always carry those values with them. And so there's, I think, a lot there, not just for children, but also for adults as well, because until you start working with wood, there's an unyielding quality that you have to contend with wood, in that it's hard and you have to work it a certain way. And if you're not careful, you remove its strength, and you learn all those things again through experience. But that practice carries over into all these other different areas. And I think that's where one of the ways that Anna and I really, Anna said we do a lot of different things. And part of that is that we pick up these little skills in one area that we're able to carry over into another area. And so I've done painting my whole life, and I do a lot of graphic design. And part of art is, there's this feeling in art where at some point you're kind of looking at the thing you're making. And maybe you all have had this experience where you're like, this looks like garbage, and I think I'd like to burn this. And when I was doing this 365 Spoons project, again, every day trying to carve a new spoon, not even doing the same style every day. I was kind of coming up with whatever, like a new design, mostly because of just the wood that I was using. I might not have had a very big piece of wood, but I kind of look at it and ask myself, what can I do with this thing? And so that really guided all of the different spoon designs I made, but it also made it so that I had to think about the best way to turn whatever piece of wood I had into something valuable and useful. And that also meant that I didn't have the benefit of knowing what was going to happen. So I would often look at the thing I was making and be like, I don't think this is going to work out. But by just keep working it, keep going at it, you find that eventually it yields itself. And that has stuck with me, just knowing when it looks like something is looking terrible and it's not going to work out, just keep going and eventually it will. All right, so what I'm doing, this piece of cherry is really nice because I get the benefit of the grain direction kind of carrying this little sweep here. Now I can, because this is from the crook of a tree, we can make something that's very, very thin but strong because we can keep intact the grain lines, or at least stack them in such a way that they'll stay together under stress. And so I'm already starting to see the shape of this spoon kind of coming out along that outline and that bottom line. Working with the hatchet was one of the things that was a little bit trickier to learn, because that's not exactly something you can use in an apartment while your children are sleeping. And if you don't believe me, go ahead and try that. But there's a feel that you have to learn with a hatchet that also I think you develop a lot faster if you can understand what's going on. You know, all a hatchet is a wedge. It's a wedge attached to a long stick. So we actually have two simple machines here. We have a wedge, just a triangle shape, and a lever that's being created by this pivot point here that is using then the weight of the head to drop that wedge onto the piece of wood. And if we can, just a simple observation like that means that if we can realize that it's not really us that's doing the work. I am not using my muscles, although there's muscles involved and you kind of have to develop the stamina for it. It's not my muscles that's creating the force that's going through the wood. It's the fact that this piece of metal that's been shaped into a sharp point has inertia to it. And that momentum, if I just a little flick of my wrist, creates tremendous amount of speed that can then transfer into that wood without my strength. And so in fact, at the end of my cut, I'm actually kind of letting go of the hatchet a little bit. And it creates this snap that produces all of the force in my cut. And so there's like this alone, that's something you get through practice, but also just observing like what exactly is happening here. All right. So I am starting to cut in this crank. This is looking like it's going to be a little bit of a smaller spoon, just because again we're dictated by the size of the piece of wood that we have. I'm going to then come over here. This is a new kind of axe block design that we saw somebody have and we started to play around with, and learning how all the different ways that it's useful is like has been a lot of fun to learn. But having like this high shelf here means that I can prop up my spoon and it's still supported, so that when I'm striking down, all of that force is still going through the spoon and into my axe block, being supported like that. All right.
Hey Josh, can you tell us what kind of spoon, or I'm sorry, what kind of axe that you're using for those spoon?
Yeah, I think that this is the Gransfors Brooks wildlife hatchet. It's nice. It has like a little short handle. It's just light enough that you can get a good snap in it. Usually, this is Ann's, and what I usually use is actually a Boy Scout hatchet that I had from when I was a kid. And I didn't use it when I was a Boy Scouts, funny enough. But once I started spoon carving, I took a second look at it, and I was like, hey, actually, this might work really well. But this is a really nice one. What matters really with any carving hatchet, like if it's going to be used for carving, is that it needs to also be ground or shaped for the work that we're doing with it. Most axes and hatchets, they have a convex bevel on the outside. And that's just so that they don't get stuck, and there's a little bit more durability in the cutting edge. But it also means that if we are trying to make a repeated and consistent strike, that it has the tendency to deflect. And so when we are regrinding a hatchet for use with carving, I'll usually flatten those bevels so it's a straight line. That way, when I go to cut, I know exactly where it's going to land and it's going to stay in that cut. Mostly because we are working at a really high angle with our cuts. And this is what allows us to get a slicing motion, be able to also get a pretty fine surface in our piece of wood. And so that we're removing most of the wood actually before we go to carve, so that we don't have a lot of work to do. We're not trying to remove a ton of wood with our knives. All right. So this is starting to shape up. One of the things that I think is like a light bulb moment for people that take some of our classes, in particular our Hatchet class, is we are intentionally trying to restrict our movements. And it's that restriction of movement that gives us different levels of control, but also is what keeps us safe. Like right now, notice where I'm pivoting from. I've kind of removed my forearm and my upper arm from the equation, and now I'm just using my wrist, which makes it so I can bring my hand in much closer and get more control, getting detailed cuts there without being worried about if I'm going to have a straight cut or not. Because now, just by hinging from this pivot point, I have restricted my range of motion and possible striking distance to this little arc wherever my wrist can go. The moment that I change my pivot point from that control, it also changes where the axe can possibly strike. And so one of the things we're constantly telling people, both with knives and with hatchets and axes, is like the first thing you want to pay attention to is the full path of the tool. Where could it possibly go? Where will it go if it slips? And if if the wood disappears, is the way that a friend of Anne's puts it. Okay, so this is getting pretty close to where I'm going to switch over to the my hook knife. But I'm going to then, first before I do that, I'm going to put in my, kind of cut away the crank here. Because we understand some things about wood direction and about the strength of wood, and also what happens when we go against the grain. Sometimes there's this trick that I learned actually from a spoon carver called Barn the Spoon, that you can use the tip of your hatchet, and I'll see if I can do it without ruining my spoon. You can use the tip of your hatchet as like a lever, and you can reverse split your piece of wood. Let's see if I can do it. There's so little wood here. Yeah, there you go. See? So this is what happens. So I can swing, I can hit, let that wedge in there. It's going against the grain, and then swing the back of the head of my hatchet, and it will catch on this little edge here and split up, allowing me to split up the handle, whereas normally we would always have to work this direction. But that's like a neat trick. And again, knowing what's actually happening here, as well as the simple machine part of your hatchet and your grain direction, allows you to find little tricks like this. Okay, I'm gonna keep working on this, and then I'm going to let Anne show you some of the cuts that we use. Again, so far, we've only used our hatchet. Anne's going to switch over to our straight knife, and also we'll both start to show you also the hook knife aspect of it as well.
Can you show us in real time, really quick, how you would prepare a blank for carving?
Which one?
Any one.
Okay. So now this is a little bit different, just because I am I'm working with the crook here, which takes some special attention, just so I'm not accidentally splitting things in the wrong way, so that I can keep like this sweep involved. But if we were making just like a regular spoon, it goes a little bit faster than that. Let me see what we have here. This one's pretty good. Okay, so I'll just go live, like how we would normally. How I'd normally make a spoon. Now, normally I also want more heartwood than this. This is cherry. There's only a touch of heartwood there. It's that heartwood that really gives it its nice coloring and distinction, but the sapwood is totally fine to use as well. So, all right, so I'm gonna do, first we remove the pith. Then I'm going to start to point my ends here. So this is preparing the head of the spoon. Then I will cut in my handle. This side here. There's a little notch on this axe block that helps keep things in place while we're cutting, so it's not sliding around on us. And I'll start to cut in my crank, which is going to be like the sweep. Start to shape the head a little bit more. Now I will cut in this. Oh yeah, I forgot about this thing. So cut in this way. So again, look at how I've restricted the range of motion just by switching to my wrist. And I've also swung my hand out here. These are some of the the things that at first they become, you do them intentionally so that you make sure that you're putting in the safety measures. And then eventually those safety measures become your habits. But it's really important at the beginning to kind of ask yourself a whole bunch of questions. We talk about it like a checklist. Is my hand out of the way? What is the full path of the tool? That makes you acknowledge these things before you do them. So that again, your brain after some time will go, this is too much information to just be thinking about all the time. Let me make this an automatic action, and that's how we develop. Like I said before, intuition, a feel, is through that process. Some people are naturally gifted, or maybe they're unintentionally kind of drawing on other experiences they've had in life, where some of these things just make, what we might call common sense. But if you look throughout your life, at some point you'll find where like an analogous experience or similar enough lesson that you were able to learn that is going to teach you in another area. Anne talks about this when she talks about some of the things that unlocked for her with spoon carving that she got from blacksmithing, particularly in thinking three-dimensionally. A brother of mine who's a programmer, programs VR, basically like VR tours of major colleges around the world. He talks about how much he learned from programming through leatherworking, which you would think don't have anything in common, but there are similarities, thematic interconnections that make it so that you do learn some things that you're able to carry over into others. Okay. All right. Come over here.
Feel free to ask any questions that you may have in the chat, and we'll be happy to answer them.
All right. So this is getting, again, right pretty close to where I want it. at this point where the sharpness and the bevel that's been ground onto your axe really matters, because then you can start to take really precise slicing cuts that help you to start to shape out things before you get into the actual knife work. And a little notch. Right. Okay, and we are about where we want to be with this. Have just a loose idea of where, what kind of spoon this would be.
Well, it can be very loose because I'm about to steal it from you.
And then again, the axe is, again, it's one of those things that if you can learn how to use, it really accelerates some of the other parts of your process, because this is really a crude tool, but you can still get in pretty far in your process. Pretty far in on the actual shape, allowing you to remove wood a lot faster, more efficiently than you can with like your knives.
Josh, is there a certain species of wood that's better than others?
Yes and no. Well, there's certain species that are worse than others. I'll say that. When I was first carving, one of the benefits of doing that spoon project, and I'm learning how to carve like small things like this with the limited tool set, is you get to try out all kinds of different woods that, if you needed a larger amount of wood, you wouldn't really be able to. It would be cost prohibitive. Or the lesson, and actually how that wood performs would be found at the end of making, say a table or a chest of drawers or something like that. Whereas with spoons like this, you can try out all kinds of wood. So I remember I found a piece of wood in my yard. It was nice and yellow, and I started carving with it. And after a little bit, just like maybe 10, 20 minutes, I noticed that my knives looked like I dragged them through sand or something. And so I went and I sharpened my knives. I had to regrind them. It's like, man, that was so weird. And then I started carving again, and I again noticed, man, my knives are really bad again. And I looked at the wood, and I looked it up, and it was honey locust, which we have here in Nashville. But the problem with honey locust and black locust and some other trees is that they pull silica up from the ground. And so there's actually basically sand inside the wood that was really messing up my my knives. But most of the time, like particularly with kitchen tools or anything that's going to have like hard use, like fruit woods are the best, and particularly stone fruit woods. Cherry, loved carving cherry. Sycamore is also very nice. We carve a lot of walnuts, but anything like plum, apple, all of those are like really the best kinds of woods for the for carving any type of implement that you're going to be using on a daily basis. Just because when they're freshly cut, they carve like a hard cheese or a hard pear, but when they dry, they're like hard as a rock. Now you don't want to try to carve them when they're hard as a rock when they're dry, because that's not a fun experience. But you can get them like a branch from a tree or whatnot. Then those are really great ones to carve. Okay, all right,
And then someone says, "What's the weight of the hatchet?" It's like 1.5 pounds, isn't it?
Yeah, this is a very light one, and it's very light. So, but I find myself liking a heavier hatchet. That's because I've built up the strength. But the other part of that is the weight of the hatchet, or the weight of your axe, is what determines momentum. just because that's also what's going to create the inertia when you swing it. So the length of your handle, the weight of your head. Now, also, that can sound like if you have a heavier hatchet that it's going to be harder to lift, but I'm holding it. I'm really kind of holding it in a balance point when I lift it up, and then I'm letting it kind of fall on its own like this. So I'm letting gravity kind of do the work for me. And by creating a stop with my palm like that, I'm able to get that snap so that when I'm lifting, the weight of the hatchet is balanced in the handle, whereas it would be much heavier or more torque on my hand if I held it out like this and I was trying to carve. So when I lift, I'm lifting up that weight, but then holding it in a place that it falls, snaps naturally just with gravity like that. So yeah, this one's maybe like 1.5 pounds, whatever. But like I said, I like a heavier one just because you can remove more wood. That comes when you also have more control over it.
Someone says, it seems the bandsaw would be quicker and easier. Is it because splitting to use grain for strength? Oh, because of splitting to use grain. Yes.
Actually, there's two parts to that. One, this is a design that I'm coming up with on the fly. But when it's something that we do on a regular basis, this takes maybe what have we done in like 5 minutes before before class?
Yes.
And that's just because of the familiarity of all of the strokes. So when you're creating on the fly, you're kind of designing and working with the grain as you're working it. But when it's a design that we've done repeatedly, I used to do this. I used to have a business where I made spoons on a regular basis, and I could go from the round to a roughed out blank in about 10 minutes. And it does keep all the strength in the wood, which is what is so vital, why we are even splitting wood or working it this way. Because you can make this very, very thin, a delicate spoon that feels nice in the hand, that's also balanced and also shaped right for the mouth, because you're working with the grain and keeping those long grain lines intact, so that you have layers of grain that are maintained from the handle, even though it bends, and through your spoon all the way out to the end. Bandsaw, though, when we have a ton of them, we go to our chairmaker friend's house and we split out the wood, and then we shape those designs on the bandsaw. All right, this is our spoon. Wait, here, let's wait. So this is where we're at with this. I'm going to let Ann show you some of these other techniques. But yeah, if this became one that we did on a regular basis, that would be very, very fast, because you're more confident with your axe strikes. I got it, like I said, I got things down to where I could do it in 5 to 10 minutes because I knew exactly what the axe was going to do with the split piece of wood. In this one, because we're working with the grain of the wood and just trying to come up with something here, that's why it would take so long. All right.
All right.
Switcha.
So, yeah, well, first of all, thanks for making me that blank to carve. But the reason I wanted Josh to split out a blank for me to carve right now is because the thing that I think has changed my spoon carving the most in the last several years is learning how to use the right tool for the job. And that's not just if we're starting with a piece of if we're starting with a round log like we did with these today, we want to be able to use the biggest tool to remove the most, the bulk of the material as quickly as possible. Because while it is 100% possible for me to whittle something away out of this block of wood, if I'm using a knife to do that entire process, it's going to take me a ridiculously long time. And I started carving spoons about 7 years ago, and I carved probably a couple hundred spoons before Josh and I started hanging out regularly this year. And then we suddenly had all of these Zoom meetings that we had to do, and we were, around, and also we were building this craft school, so I didn't have all of my power tools that I usually use to build furniture. So spoon carving suddenly became something that I was doing on a regular basis. And this is when it really started to lock down for me that if you want to carve a lot of spoons, which we did like a spoon carving fundraiser for our building. So Josh and I carved a lot of spoons to do that. And in that process, I learned, like, yeah, we need to use the best tool for the job to remove the most material the quickest. And we start with these with a log, and then we'll split them either with, if it's a big log, we'll split them with wedges first. Then we'll move to a tool called a froe, which splits the wood long ways. And then once we're at kind of little wedges like this, like what Josh turned into that spoon blank there, then we'll start using a hatchet to carve it down. The thing is, though, when we are, just like Josh said, when we are using a hatchet, just like Josh said, when we're carving a lot of spoons, what we'll do is we'll get the initial splits done with the wedges and the froes and the axes that get us basically down to a shape that we know has the grain of the wood going through the entire thing. So you'll notice that this little spoon blank that he carved for me has a bend in it, or a crook. And that is because it came out of a piece where the actual log had a bend in it. And that is actually where the bandsaw is a fantastic tool to remove a lot of material in a hurry. But the bandsaw doesn't know how the tree went, or how the tree was growing. Whereas a axe or a wedge or a froe will not let you split any other way than the way that the tree was actually growing. And so if we were to just try to cut a spoon design like this out of a square blank of wood on the bandsaw, we would lose all of the grain strength right here. So, Josh always rolls his eyes when I talk about how often I was spanked as a child. But I was very, very naughty. Let's just put it that way. And there were a lot of spoons that were broken on my little behind because they were commercially made spoons that had been made with power tools that ignored the way the tree had grown. And so if there was any shape or any curve or anything, it was just like, well, I hope that there's enough grain in here to support it. And after just enough spankings, there wasn't. And so those spoons would snap. And so now I say, spanking is not as big of a deal anymore in 2021. But if you want a strong spoon that's going to be able to scoop ice cream or anything else, you need to start with, again, the biggest tool that you can to split out the wood in such a way that it will follow the grain. And then you use it, basically you use whatever biggest tool you can to remove the bulk of the material as quickly as you can. By the time that we get, practice with the hatchet, then we can create a shape like this that actually will allow us to use a knife to really quickly remove our material. But just moving to the knife doesn't, in and of itself, mean that we are now at the stage that we can just whittle this material away. I will say that my first 40 spoons that I was carving, I had one tool in my arsenal, and that was what we like to call the thumb lever grip. And if you've ever seen anyone whittle anything, then you've probably seen them doing this little motion here. And this little motion is great. You have a ton of control. You know exactly like what the knife is doing, but you'll notice that my knife is taking little tiny, tiny shavings. And so even with this design already basically shaped, it's going to take me a heck of a long time to carve my spoon just like this. Also, I'm going to get some pretty nasty blisters on my thumb right now. And so even though we've switched to the knife, we actually still have a bunch of different tools at our disposal. And so in our Basics of Hand Carving class, Josh and I teach 5 basic knife grips that they'll keep you safe, but they'll also make it so that you know what cut to go to when as you're removing material, so that you can be as safe as possible, but also as efficient as possible. Because I don't want to actually, now that I know what other tools I have available, I don't want to be removing little glitter-sized pieces of material right now. I want to be removing like pretty big shavings. So we start after coming from the axe to, we have two really powerful cuts, and one of them is called the power cut. These are very, very clever names, I know. Just try not to get too excited about them. The power cut is going to be what removes material the quickest. And we're going to use the power cut for shaping the bowl of the spoon and the handle. And we're not really going to worry about any of these middle bits with the power cut. Another thing to think about, when we're using a knife, I always say that I'm going to be the only teacher that ever tells anyone it's okay to cut corners and you always should. And the thing about that is that with knives, it is so much easier to cut on the corner piece of wood than to try to remove a whole bunch of all this material all at once. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to adopt a little mantra that actually serves two purposes. Cutting the corners allows me to make easier cuts, but it also allows me to start to think about my piece three-dimensionally as I'm working it. So if I take material off of this corner, I also want to take that same amount of material off of the other corner. And I want to think about the way that I'm removing material from this piece of wood as systematically as I can, because having a system and you know, again, if going back to my whittling analogy, if I'm just doing like this and just watching this material disappear, slowly over time, again, it's not just going to take me forever to carve, but it's also going to be, who knows if I don't have a specific system that I'm using to remove the material as I'm going, and I'm just carving willy-nilly, just thinking, okay, well, there's some pieces there. Oh gosh, well, there's also some pieces over here that I need to carve. Oh, well, the handle up here needs some adjustment. This is going to end up not only taking me forever and a year to carve because I'm not actually focusing or repeating any of my movements, but it's also going to be really, really hard for me to watch the shape of the spoon as it develops and make artistic decisions along the way. And it's going to take me, again, just so much longer. So I want to think about, okay, when I still have a bunch of material to remove, I want to use the biggest tool in my arsenal, and that is the power cut. And so I'm going to just back this up for a second and show you here. So as I'm using the power cut, I'm going to want to systematically shape the spoon. So I'm going to take material from here, move this way across the bowl, and then come back to this side of the bowl and take another sweep and just watch the lines as I'm doing it. So with that power cut, I'm going to sit here, and this is how we are basically using leverage to make what we need to see happen. It looks like I have, I'm able to remove huge pieces of material here, even though this is actually very well shaped already, so I don't have to remove a ton of material. But I'm able to remove a ton of material without actually using muscles at all. I'm using the power of leaning to my advantage. And I don't know if there's any cane carvers here or people who've carved canes. The way that we do this cut is actually very similar to the way that we might lean out over a cane. And with all of these cuts, we're making our body movement, our knife movement, it's moving in a way that's restricted so that it keeps our body safe, but it's also moving so repeatedly that we know exactly what's happening with the knife, which then frees up our wood holding hand. If this is the machine that cuts, this is the hand that resists and puts the wood into the path of the knife. So I think for a lot of people who are trying to learn new cuts or new ways of using their carving tools, the hardest thing for them is that they are thinking about, hey, I just want to see my knife make some cuts, so I'm going to put my knife in whatever position I can to make some cuts. But A, that's very inefficient, and B, very unsafe. So we always want to think about, as Josh said earlier, the full path of the tool. Even like swinging an axe has with it its own inbuilt terrifying measures, because I'm sure like all of us are thinking about not wanting to chop off our fingers or like run an axe head into our leg or anything else. But with these cuts, we want to make our cuts repeatable. We want to know where the action wants to come from with the cut, and then we want to put the path in that place. Josh and I have, like we always call it, it's like running an experiment. We have all these questions that we ask ourselves. If we're watching someone do something on the internet, then we're like, okay, well, it looks like they're holding the knife and the wood this way. And then I noticed that instead of just carving wherever on the spoon, they're carving like a full path across the bowl, and then they're flipping it, and then they're doing the handle, and then all these other things. And we basically turn all of these things into checklists that we can ask ourselves. If that person is holding their body in such a way that they can lean their whole body out over the cut. You notice that as they start to get off balance, they move their foot so that they can rebalance there. How are they holding the knife? And in this particular cut, I'm holding the knife like this kind of, it seems like I'm holding it in a fist, but really one thing that I'm sure carvers have heard this before, you always want to pretend the handle of your tool is a baby bird. And you don't want to squish that bird. A, it's going to introduce a lot of tension into your wrist and potential injuries there. But B, it's also going to, just introduce fatigue before it needs to happen. If we really think about what's actually supposed to happen with these cuts, if we if we're holding the knife here and that tip is facing up and we're exerting pressure down on the cut, then there is actually a pivot point in the handle that's pivoting this up into my flesh, which then allows me to basically just grip it like this and allow that pivoting to happen and let that back of the handle kind of just rotate into my hand. So again, we start with the power cuts, or the powerful cuts to remove material. We think about how we can turn our body into a machine. We look at the design and we systematically move through it. So now as I'm watching this bowl develop, I'm wanting to remove some very specific pieces of material that right here I have power, but I don't have control. So I want to move to my next most powerful cut, and that's called the chest lever grip. But with this chest lever grip, I am once again using leverage, not strength, to my advantage. And as Josh was saying earlier, I'm limiting my body's motions and mechanics by perfect. I'm limiting my body's motions and mechanics, but I'm also introducing leverage. So here I'm holding the knife again, basically between my thumb and my forefinger, and allowing that pivot point to happen against my wrist. But really all I have to do is think about my elbows becoming a giant lever that's going to give me an insane amount of strength if I'm using my chest as a fulcrum. And I can then have an extreme amount of control, but again, and an extreme amount of control and an extreme amount of power, but again, not really have to worry about, about cutting myself, because if this is the only path that the knife could possibly take, well, then I am fully safe as long as this is the only thing that's happening. So I'm again turning this knife cut and creating a machine, and then I'm producing the work to that knife path and putting this in the way. Then if I want to, again, remove material and use leverage to my advantage, then I can also actually introduce my other elbow and turn this one into a giant lever by using my knuckles on my chest as a fulcrum. And then I can remove all this material. So I'm getting, again, an insane amount of strength, or I'm getting an insane amount of power without having to sacrifice, or without having to use my muscles. And so now I've got this, the bowl of the spoon basically shaped to my liking. I like that little dome, and you can also see, well, actually, I don't know if Zoom will let you see, but you can also see that there are long, clean lines here. I mean, they will still need to be cleaned up, but there's a very intentional shape to this, and that's because I've removed material intentionally by basically going through a system or a checklist in my mind. What needs to happen next? So I'll use the chest lever grip to do shaping here after I've used the power cut. And again, always thinking about looking at the lines and the long lines and those reflections. Then once I've got it that shaped to the at least pretty close to what I want my final shape of the back of this spoon to look like, then I'll move to what's called a pull cut. And I mean, if anyone was in Boy Scouts or had a grandpa or an uncle or anyone who ever handed them a pocket knife, they were probably told not to cut towards themselves. But again, if we are able to limit our range of motion and think about what needs to happen, think about the full path of the tool, make the path of the tool repeatable and predictable, then we can lock our elbows against our body, and we get to handle all of the really tough bits in the middle here and along the handle using the pull cut. So this pull cut is going to allow me to deal with all this tricky grain. You'll notice that as I'm doing this tricky grain will start to build up behind the knife. And if I were to just force this through, it would chip actually behind the knife. So here, I'm able to come from the other direction and cut here. And then just as I systematically did with my power cut and my chest lever grip, I can systematically shape the handle of this spoon as well. And because I've limited my body motion, I'm sacrificing a little bit of power here, but by limiting my body motion, I'm able to come in here and make really safe cuts, again, very close to my body. And that would be how I would do the next little bits of shaping. Then if we understand how the cuts are supposed to work, then we can do little modifications. Like, I know that I need to limit my range of motion because I don't want to poke myself in the lungs. But here I can actually limit my range of motion even more by using my fingers as a hinge point, my fingers of the other hand as a hinge point. And then I can basically just by squeezing my hands together, make a really controlled cut that shapes the back of the spoon here. And then, we can come back and clean this up with our pull cut here like this. And again, with all of these, it's really just understanding our body mechanics that we need to put into place to keep us safe, but then also know the right tool for the job to actually remove material in a quick, systematic manner that's going to help us to shape the spoon quickly and also, basically get the best design as quickly and safely as possible. And so, there's some knots in here that are making it real fun. But after we have gotten the spoon to its almost final shape and design, only that, this is still a long ways out, I'll be just totally clear there. But it's then and only then that we start moving in closer. So you'll notice we're using the thumb lever grip. And this thumb lever grip can help me to clean up this bowl, again, in a very controlled, very safe manner. But were I trying to use this tiny little cut this entire time, the efficiency of my spoon carving would have gone down drastically. So after we have the thumb lever grip and we can do our final shaping and whatever, if you've ever seen someone do these cool, Josh and I always have these little facets at the end of our spoons, and because we always do a knife finish, and you can actually get these facets by using this thumb lever grip. The thing that keeps us safe and limits the range of motion for this cut is actually the fact that this never leaves my thumb. So I know that I am always safe as long as when the knife is engaged, it's never leaving my thumb. But yeah, this is where we get those cool little facets. We can do some little, again, modifications, thinking about where the full path of the tool is and limiting our range of motion. So you see here, that does that. And also, I just forgot to, oh yes, so everyone, there's actually a lot of questions that I accidentally missed. Does peach wood work even though it's already dry? I have actually carved dry peach wood, and it is very, very crumbly. And really, if you're using a Sloyd knife, it is very possible to carve not like dry wood, but it's far less enjoyable to do so than green wood. And so I always say, people always ask like what kind of spoon or what kind of wood do they need to carve like this, or to learn how to carve like this. And I always say whatever green wood you have available. In fact, people are always like, you can't carve oak or all these things. Actually, here is a beautiful white oak spoon that Josh carved a while ago. You'll notice it still needs some cleanup on the back there, but this is white oak. And so really whatever's greenest is going to be best to carve. I'm just going to keep carving here. I'm turning the camera so I can read the questions and carve at the same time. This will go well. Does the shape of the wedge taken from the original... Okay, actually, Josh, you're going to have to read this. Sorry.
It's the shape of the wedge taken here. I'll switch cameras here. Shape of the wedge taken from the original round. Alter the strength of the spoon. If so, is there an optimal diameter round? So I think what we're talking about is like this is kind of wedge shaped. I've created like a triangle with the axes. What we're trying to get after, I don't know about an optimal round. You can make a big spoon, a very small spoon. What we're really after is the way that the annular rings are stacking. And we want them to stack in what's called a catenary curve. Catenary curve is the curve that's made if you were to hang a chain, or the curves that are on an egg. The strength of an egg, because those curves are all connected to each other and there's no like hard or sharp turns, it compresses and it distributes the strength. So with wood, we have this curvature here, and that curvature is also on the sides. And so you can imagine it's like a small ring stacked on a slightly larger ring, stacked on a slightly larger ring, and it smoothly, each layer is supporting the layer underneath it. And there's no stress points because of just how they're stacked. If we take too hard of a turn, or we create a spot where you kind of have two angles meeting, because of the stresses that are put on our wood, it would cause actually the layers to separate, because all of the stress would be put on the two layers stacked, and that stress would be put on one point. Whereas with a curve, you are distributing any stresses. Spoon carving, or particularly just hand carving, is something. Anne used to work at a woodworking school, and she ran their woodworking program for a while. And it's something I've also told people, if they want to learn woodworking and to get a really in-depth knowledge of it, to take up hand carving. Because by having a piece of wood in your hand and having to work with it, this small piece of wood, you learn what is happening in the wood, and you learn what is too thin, what is too thick, where stress points are, what works and what doesn't, just through the experience of things. Which you do get quite a bit of that with a piece of wood locked onto a table, but there is something to be said of the. Even I was shaping the back of this bowl here. And while I'm doing it, my finger is on the inside, and I'm using the feel of the knife on the back of my bowl and my finger on the inside to tell me how thick or how thin this piece of wood is. These are the kinds of things that just get in your bones and allow you to, like I said, that it transfers over into different areas. So an optimal diameter is, it's more about if it works or not. And having those curves, understanding some of the principles underneath how wood is actually supporting itself and it creates its strength, helps you to make judgment calls and improvise. And it becomes much more difficult when you're working with like whatever piece of wood that you have, because you need to make that piece of wood work as opposed to imposing a shape onto that piece of wood. which you're able to do with sculpture because there isn't going to be any stresses on it. But when you have a utility item or something that needs to, one, look good, but also function well, these are some of the considerations that you have to take into account. This is the spoon that I first carved. I'll do a little close up on this. This still has finish cuts to be made on it, but you can make a very, like I said, a very light, delicate spoon. This one would be nice for like a little sauce on a table. Kind of also makes you like learning how to make utility items and understand both the form, how something looks, but also the function, and make those two meet helps you to then design other things as well. I've learned so much about design because of just the experience of having an idea. I want to make an item that, like a way to spread butter that works like a paintbrush, and coming up with like all the design constraints of that. And we can you grab one of those, a butter pedal? Anne's gonna grab one, but it allows you to try out different things, and you can invent on a very small scale to make something that it meets a need that only you have. Making a salt cellar or making a small spoon. This is a butter paddle that I created, that I designed so that I could hold it like a paintbrush. So all of the force, instead of it being transferred like this, where you're creating a lever and all the stress is on your I make a lot of bagels and waffles in the morning. I have two boys. So all the stress is on your wrist. By holding it this way, that force gets spread out in a more even way, and you can spread it out very nicely, and it becomes a much more enjoyable experience. Something that becomes a daily staple. We've used this every single day in the 7 years that I made it originally. It's been in use every single day, just because it's so much better than just the standard average butter knife that you might have. And so being able to like learn how to work with wood, create something that out of basically a piece of trash wood that will last the rest of your life, that becomes heirloom items that also become experiences, that your kids and their kids have. I mean, everybody remembers grandma's cooking spoon, right? It's the one that she used every single day.
Some of us more than others.
Some of us more than others. But there's like a nostalgia that's there because it's connected to the memories that were made in the daily use of that thing. And by knowing how to carve this way, just taking simple things, wood with a particular story, and imbuing it with a story because it was something that you made, again, makes heirloom items with just a handful of tools. It's a wonderful skill. We're so like privileged to get to teach it to people every week. Yeah. So that is I think that we're over our time, but hopefully that was informative and beneficial for you guys. It's a smattering of a lot of things that we end up touching on in a lot of our classes. We go more in depth into a lot of these things, as well as make sure that everybody has the fundamentals of all of these basic skills. We're taking a break from teaching this month, or next month, so that we can work on the actual school building. Like they said at the beginning, we both run and are starting something called the School of All Trades, a place where we can bring teachers from all around the world in all different kinds of trades to share some of these dying or more like forgotten skills that served our ancestors for so long and still continue to serve if we just contextualize them. And so we're going to be building this building, and we teach classes on a regular basis. So this is the last month that we're teaching a lot of our spoon carving classes.
However, if you do want to sign up for a basics of hand carving class and learn sorry to interrupt you, learn the 5 knife cuts, we still have space in a couple of our April classes. So you can check those out at theschoolofalltrades.com. And also we might have a couple slots left in one of our sharpening classes too.
Yeah, and then there's also an axe class that I teach on the weekends that will go into the details of how to actually use an axe and a hatchet effectively. All of these things too, we're like constantly considering people who have difficulty using these tools, and a lot of hand carving, which I'm sure a lot of you are feeling this, where just the years and years of using your muscles, using your joints, it starts to produce pain that is going to take this skill that gives you such vitality away. by thinking about it in different ways. How can I use leverage instead of strength in order to continue to use this tool to generate a lot of force without actually even needing to actually hold my tool very much, like I can do with this cut. I can hold my hands open and I can generate like a cut that throws a chip across the room because I'm utilizing the leverage that's created through my body mechanics. Those are all important things as well that we teach in these classes. So
Hey, Josh,
we will go ahead. We could continue to talk all day. So you guys cut us off here.
I have a couple other questions that are in the chat. I'll go ahead and read them off to you.
Sure.
One, they want to know about the Floyd knife that you all are using, if you can talk a little bit about that. The second question is, how do you finish the knives? And can you talk a little bit about the hook knife you use for the inside of the bowl?
Yeah, absolutely. So finishing, after we really like to encourage people to do a knife finish, but for their first, dozen or so spoons, there's no shame whatsoever in using using sandpaper. The thing that sandpaper does, though, is sandpaper scrapes instead of slices, and so one of the reasons we like using a knife finished surface on our spoons is because a nice sharp knife is going to slice these wood fibers and actually leave a much harder, more resilient surface, so that when you do go and wash it with water, it's going to be more resistant to that. That said, modern dish soaps are made to cut through grease, and they do a very good job. So we use just usually salad oil. Walnut oil is what we use. Anything that doesn't go rancid is a great oil to use. And you obviously don't put it in the dishwasher because the dishwasher heats up too fast. But once you've put your last few finishing cuts or your final sanding and maybe done some grain raising and then resanded it down, then you can add just oil, walnut oil or whatever with your fingers, dry it off with a paper towel, put it in your rack to dry, and then it's ready to go. And then, every few washings, if you notice that it's starting to get a little gray around the edges, you can just add some more oil, and that'll help it to last and last and last. And as far as the knife, we are using Josh has a fancier one, but I'm using a Mora knife. We both have very fancy tools that we've acquired over the years, but we teach our classes with tools that you can't just get on the internet. This is a Mora knife from Sweden. It's just a little straight blade like this, and I think it's like $25, $26. When it comes to hook knives, the Mora knife is a fine starting tool, but you'll want to, if you get into spoon carving, you'll want to get something that's a little bit better ergonomically designed, so that you just have a little bit less wear and tear on your fingers as you're carving. And Josh, if you're further than I am on that, so sure. Why don't you? Oh, actually, here, you can use this if you want.
Okay. So a hook knife, all it is basically if you took your straight knife and you bent it, it's a hook. But it's made to this shape actually. Most of the time, actually, I'm gonna have to lock my focus here. This shape right here is actually made to match the inside of a particular type of spoon. So a lot of times you can buy a hook knife with a particular sweep, and it will create the inside of the actual curvature inside of that spoon. So I could, if I was kinder to myself, make a spoon, an eating spoon that was about that long, and I would be able to, by the end, just take one swipe with it, and that would leave a finished surface underneath. I use this small hook knife just because it's so versatile, but it's made to be used. Let me come over here in what's called a scoop cut, and we kind of use our hands like this. I would say it's like a sock puppet, and also using leverage that allows us to take the handle of the spoon, the handle of this knife, and create two counterpoints on each other so that they're actually levering against each other to create this cutting motion. So again, we don't have to have like tremendous grip strength, but we can use it to create a tremendous amount of force on the inside there. These other ones, this would be the one that I would use for this one, just because it's going to match much more closely this this angle. But you can see how nice it is to have a sharp hook knife. With this knife and with our Sloyd knife, they're much sharper than actually the majority of tools that people have, even sharper than most chisels. And the reason for that is where did I set mine? The angle of this blade, or the bevel. See how long that bevel is? It's long on both sides, so it creates a very, very fine and sharp cutting edge. But you know, the steeper or the deeper the angle, the sharper the edge, but also the weaker that leading cutting edge is. And so this is made to be used on green wood. You really want to use this on dry wood, just because this is made to take, I mean, I'll see if I can do it on this one. I can take a tremendously fine shaving once you build up the skill to do it. Watch. Because of how fine that cutting edge is. So I can create a shaving that, where am I? That is like thread thin, because this edge is so sharp. And it also makes it so that I can lay that bevel down flat and actually feel when that bevel is riding on the flat surface to create what look like continuous cuts, because I can ride that bevel all the way down, and that leaves a knife, what we call a knife finish, which is like a glass-like surface that I'm sure a lot of you woodcarvers are familiar with, just how smooth a sharp blade will leave a surface like that. With the hook knife, depending on the sweep of the hook knife, that's really going to depend on what you end up doing with it. This one, because this is a little bit more deeper, I used my this hook knife, but I'm using all the same principles. I'm almost using the handle here like a lever and just levering it against it. A lot of people, because they have either wrist pain or their hands are just too small, we try to impress on them the importance of leverage, because you can, like, I could hold my knife like this, like where I actually don't have any strength on the handle. But if I just use leverage, that the leverage that's being created by just turning this spoon like that will cut, because of I'm able to use body mechanics and the force that's created from just these simple movements like that. And so this is also where you can. I'm trying to do this more and more, just try to save my hands, save my wrists by using the power of simple machines to help aid me, instead of me needing to like white knuckle this or just muscle my way through it. In fact, it's like somebody who's a professional or an expert is really somebody who's going to learn how to use these tools for the next 10, 20 years sustainably, instead of just, doing something that looks cool, but your hands are hurting afterwards. Yeah, so this I would then start to clean up this edge, just make it a lot finer, and this makes just like a really nice spoon. I mean, with this one, like I said, we would just keep coming across. Both of these are able to cut a very, very fine shaving. In particular, like I said, in green wood, without a lot of strength, just because of the steepness of their bevel and how we employ leverage and other stuff. So yeah, is there another question in there? I think that was all of them. Hook knife, Sloyd knife, something else.
Yeah, I think you've got them all finished.
Oh.
The other thing. Can you both tell us a little bit about your offerings as far as where people can find you and what they can find on your website?
Yeah, well, you go first.
Okay, so you can find all of our classes either through anneofalltrades.com and clicking on classes, or you can go straight to the schoolofalltrades.com. That's where we have, you can sign up for live classes. Again, this is, we are taking a small break for this month. Next month, sorry.
We still have classes, for a couple classes on our website right now.
This month we have classes. Next month we're taking a break so that we can change up the way that we're offering these classes so that they are actually beneficial for people, so that people walk away with the skill, and so that we can build the building. We also have a course coming out on a platform called Skillshare, which is a learning platform where you can learn all kinds of different things. We were able to record an originals course with them. You'll be seeing that this next week. And that's on all of these skills.
Yeah, I mean we go through the actual how-tos of how to design your spoon, how to think about design, even like how to design things functionally. Josh mentioned really quickly what he did to design that butter paddle. So there's like a whole lesson in that course on that as well. There's an axe demo. We actually go out into the woods and pick out like good and bad trees or good and bad logs or good and bad pieces of wood to cut. And we talk about why, we talk about how you divide up a log and shape it into a spoon blank. And then we take it through to a full finished spoon, both with a knife finish and using sandpaper as well. That is coming out on April 19th, and we'll have links for that next week. But in the meantime, if you want to keep up with anything that we're doing, you can go to theschoolofalltrades.com, or you can sign up for our newsletter. Do we have the newsletter set up on that yet?
No.
Okay, so you can sign up for my newsletter at anneofalltrades.com, and spoiler alert, they're one and the same. So yeah. I mean, you can also find a lot of YouTube videos that I put on YouTube that take you through all kinds of those same disappearing life skills, from how to set up a garden to how to blacksmith, your own tools, your own woodworking tools. I walk through the creation of my spoon carving set that I made in my blacksmith shop on my YouTube channel. All kinds of stuff. Building Windsor chairs, building whiskey cabinets, all that kind of stuff. Yeah.
You do Welsh spoons?
I have never done a Welsh
Do
spoon.
Welsh spoons?
Like a love spoon?
Yes.
I have done a love spoon. Not all the way my cup of tea, but I wrote a book as well called How to Whittle. And that has 25 projects. I don't ever remember the subtitle. Anyways, in that there's a love spoon in there. But that's a book I did through Taunton Press that takes all of these same techniques that we just talked about, this 5 basic knife cuts, straight knife, hook knife, hatchet, and a saw, just those 4, and shows how you can carve, absolutely anything: hat racks, candle holders, love spoons, salt cellars, cooking spoons. Sky's the limit. Door stops. Did you guys know you could carve a door stop from wood? Just kidding.
Do you know you could also drop a log on the floor and it would be a door stop? So your first carving
project. But if you carved it a little bit, nobody would burn it. So it's as Roy Underhill says, it's been civilized.
All right, cool. Any other burning questions? Thank you all so much for being here. Sorry that I'm blurry. All right. I think that's everything. So yeah, we really appreciate you all taking time out of your busy schedules to hang out with us today. And here next week is going to be a real fun year celebration.
All right, you all. I'll go ahead and take back over the meeting. Then I want to thank you all for coming on, doing your demonstration. You shared a lot of good information for us. Make sure, everybody, that you go out and check out the School of All Trades. I know they've been doing a big fundraiser to try to get that building done. So make sure you go out and check that out. Look for them on Instagram, Facebook, YouTube, and Twitter. That's Josh Nava and Anneofalltrades, 365 Spoons. You can find them in all those places, so make sure you go out and check them out. I want to let you know a little bit about some of the workshops that are available that's coming up. Make sure you go out and check out woodcarvingacademy.com. A lot of these wood shops are available on that site, and all the information is available there. I know today Dwayne Gosnell and Del Green both started classes. Those workshops are caricature carving workshops, and they started today, so those are no longer available. Dave Stetson has a class coming up. Dave's on the meeting today of a seated man caricature. I think those slots are still available, so if you're interested in that class, check out Dave Stetson. Janet Cordell is going to be doing a basic horse class. I think she still has spots available in her class. In May, Kevin Applegate has a Captain Chum Bucket class available. Bob Hershey's doing Fearless Freddy, the Surfing Frog, and Janet Cordell's doing a Sky Doll. And then in June, Ryan Olson's going to be doing a class on carving miniatures. And Dale Green's going to be doing another class on carving a cowboy called Roper. So again, go out and check those out. We talked last week about Daniel Clay that's come on and presented with us. He does chip carving. You can find him at Saturday Box Company, and I think he has some classes coming up at the end of this month and the beginning of May. So make sure you check out Daniel Clay. Again, next week we'll have Alec Lacasse on. He's going to be doing a demonstration on cottonwood bark carving. I think he still also does classes, so make sure you check him out. We have a lot of good things coming up. So again, thank you all for joining us today. If you've missed meetings in the past, go out on YouTube and check those out. We thank everybody for contributing to the Buy Us a Coffee. And again, I'll put that link over in the chat in case you're interested. Josh and Ann, thank you all again for joining us. We look forward to other things that you all will be doing. We'll follow you as far as the school goes. Good luck with that. If there's anything we can do to help advertise classes or other things that you have, make sure you reach out to us and let us know, and we'll do it in this forum so that we can keep the word out. And again, thank you all for joining us on Saturday. We'll be on next week, and we'll have Alec Lacasse on for our 1-year anniversary. Thank you all.
Bye, everybody.